to everyone joining us today, including our panelists and our listeners online. I'm joined by my co-host, Zubair, in this series of In Conversation, a follow-up to some of the earlier conversations Zubair and I have been having on what is likely to be an incredible game-changing journey in the startup entrepreneur space.
Jazakallah, Firoz bhai. Well, yes, as you said, we're hosting a thought leadership series that engages entrepreneurs, investors and policymakers on the same platform. So it's all about being peer-to-peer. And it's to discuss thought-provoking themes for the new wave of entrepreneurs that are shaping what we're referring to as a global halal economy.
So this series has been dubbed Reflections and is the world's first online, offline entrepreneurship hub, where our panelists will share their insights and expertise.
And Firoz, don't forget, we'll be getting answers to all of those questions that every startup co-founder is itching to ask, basically on the real value of these relationships. And of course, the thematic discussions often missed on the startup circuit. So we will be talking about impacts, the SDGs, of course, access to funding, women, economic empowerment, inclusion, wider diversity, and of course, sustainability.
And then all of these conversations will culminate in a plenary of intellect, expertise, and talent in December at the Halal Economy Conference being held between the 5th and the 7th of December at the Excel London.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's get started then. We already have a fairly big list of questions, but our listeners can use the Q&A tabs to ask questions which will come through myself and Zubair. We'll put them to our panel. If you can please keep your questions to the point and to which panelist the question is addressed to.
So today we have champions who've navigated this journey themselves. All their bios are already shared through the LinkedIn hyperlinks. And we'll be asking them, what do they believe investors actually look out for in entrepreneurs and startups? And during this conversation, we'll also be discussing if there's a set formula or a pattern that people such as our panelists actually follow or look out for, or do they really just follow their gut instincts based on a feeling, on an idea, a person, or a trend?
So welcome to all of our panelists. We have Faraz Khan, CEO of Seed Ventures. We have Syahrul Nizar Yahya, crew of Pixel Play from Malaysia. We have Mohammad Nazir, OBE, chairman of NCG Group and co-chairman of One Academy, the United Kingdom. We both want to personally welcome you to our In Conversation series, and of course for being part of a bigger picture as we reshape the halal economy narrative.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Like Mohammad said, it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Great. So of course, no formal introductions are needed. You guys are pretty well regarded. So I think let's get into it. So if I can ask you guys to relax, and as well as wearing your investor hat today, do cast your mind back to when you started your journey in this space. So first question, and this is to any one of you, and this has been a popular one, by the way. Do investors really need a business plan, or is this merely to leverage negotiation on percentages for equity? So maybe Faraz, you can kick it off. Share your thoughts.
It's a very interesting and a valid question, actually. The fact is that when we started off investing, we went through various kind of matrices and Excel sheets and formulas. But the more you grow, the more you realize that at the end of it, it's the founder's maturity, the idea, and how the quality of research has been part of that journey. Now, Excel sheets, formulas, equity percentages, these are, for personally speaking, they're peripherals for me. And as an institution, we have now moved to a point where even if there is no formal business plan, if there is no formal structure that is being provided to us, we still look into this idea or that founder's journey. And it's a collective approach rather than just specifically business plans. So from an absolute structured point of view to appreciating the intangibles, I think these two, a mix of that has helped us grow as investors and appreciate the intangibility aspect as much as the tangible ones as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, here's a curveball question, and this one is perhaps something that Mohammad can probably answer first. Do I really need to share all of my ideas and plans with an investor? What if he or she still turns around to say no to the investment and I've told them everything? How do I trust an investor is sincere?
I think this is a very, very interesting question, one that every person that's looking to go into a business asks, particularly when they have something really invaluable that they have created in terms of innovation or invention. And it's the right question to be asked by the individuals that are seeking investment. But it's quite a balance, because if you don't share your full idea with the investor may turn around and not invest because they're not getting the gist of the business, that concept you have. On the other hand, if you do share it with investors and you follow it up, or you proceed it with an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, which ties them down to keeping the idea secret, they will say to you, predominantly, a lot of the tech company investors will say to you, well, we see thousands of business plans and business ideas every day. We don't have the time to sign NDAs or have the time to sign triple agreements, etc. So at the end of the day, they leave you to make a judgment whether you trust the investors in your business ideas that you have, or whether you're not prepared to do that. More than often, the individuals that are seeking investment are so desperate to receive the investment, they will basically say that they will share the idea, and they will make sure they share enough to make the idea as a carrot, to enable the investors to feel that they need to invest in the business. So I think in the end, it's very important for the individuals that are seeking investment to be able to understand exactly how much they can share in terms of intellectual property, not to give too much away so as this can then be shared with other potential competitors, but enough to be able to entice the investor to be interested in your business. And I can say 99% of the investors will not sign an NDA, and 100% of investors will want to know as much as you can give them, so they can feel whether they're going to get their return on investment, whether the business has a scalability, to it, whether the product or the business idea or concept that you have is worth while investing in. So I think that it's caution, but at the same time, if you're too cautious, then you may not be, you may end up not giving enough information to merit the investment that you're seeking.
Okay, I just want to touch upon the exact points that you've mentioned. So if I try and put this, just echo what you've said, so our participants can understand this in sort of layman's terms or non-technical language, that they won't necessarily get an NDA signed, and maybe some of the startups won't even have access to an NDA in the first place, because going to lawyers can be expensive, and maybe they can't afford that, maybe they can. But if fundamentally, if I understand correctly, what you're suggesting is if they can chalk out their idea on one sheet of paper that perhaps gives the gist of the idea, so that they can explain it as though they were giving a synopsis of a TV program, if they're able to articulate where they see the business growth and the scalability and the replicability of that, then that should essentially be the 4 or 5 points that would engage an investor enough to have that next conversation. Would that be correct?
That would be correct. And what we have in the investors, you could say, community is what is called a teaser. Teaser, okay, like a basic, concise concept of the business,
right,
which you just stipulated. So it could be a 1 A4 sheet. It could be 2 A4.
And is this, Faraz, I'll just throw it back to you, is this good practice for entrepreneurs to be looking at doing? So if people are thinking of getting into this space, is this something that they should be just doing out of practice anyway, whether they need an investor or not?
I think just like Mohammad said, I think the teaser concept is a good one. But actually investing into your legal structure at an early stage and creating an NDA, I think it's worth it, because that also demonstrates to the investors that how serious you are in your business practices, and it's a standard business practice. And the fact is that there are a lot of legal setups now that they actually create pro bono services for startups and small, the young entrepreneurs. So there is a lot available to actually protect your idea and demonstrate that you are on a mature journey in terms of starting your communication or sharing your ideas. So
yeah, and I think
it would be worth actually investing and creating an NDA and a legal environment before you actually share your teaser idea.
Okay, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is about investing and investing in your own time in that structure. Okay, so we've got a question that's just come through. Okay, so you guys as our panelists are not getting an easy ride today, and I think our listeners are getting full value. So here's a question. Why do investors generally give their advice? So why do investors generally give their advice? They seem to think they know my business better than me. Whoever wants to take a shot at that.
I think more than often, it's me, Nazir. I think more than often, investors seem to have seen so many business plans and business ideas. What they say, we've done it, been there, we know it. And so more or less, I think they're so confident that, you give them an idea and all of a sudden they've already got a roadmap and plan of what the business might, be like or is. And it's their gut feeling or their ability, to be able to identify a business idea and to have a foresight in terms of knowing, in their words, knowing what the business is about. You could say that more than often they're right, but not every time they're right. Because I think I've seen many times where colleagues that are part of my investment sit there and say, well, you don't have to tell us this because we know all about it. And I say, well, let them talk about it, because they know better than we know, and maybe they have a different angle to present. Maybe the market is different, maybe their approach is different in terms of how they want to present the product and the innovation aspect of developing the product, and maybe their ability to capture the market is done in a different way, in an innovative way. So give the person who's presenting the business plan the chance to present it and listen to see whether they have the competence, they're confident, do they know the business inside out, do they know all the aspects of the business that they're presenting to you. But I think more than often what I'm told is that the first seconds or 15 seconds is critical. If you can entice the investor with your strap line or whatever, and they get it, they get the business idea, then you've got them interested. But I think it's always important not to be pushed aside by saying we know the idea. It's better to say yes. We presume that you come across businesses such as this, but we got something very unique, and we'd like you to give us an opportunity, a few extra minutes, to be able to describe that. So be calm, be confident, and be polite in terms of trying to get more time to be able to explain your business idea concept.
Right, thanks, Dr. Mohammad. I just want to say a warm welcome to Syahrul, who's just joined us. We had some technical problems, so welcome to the panel.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you, Syahrul?
How are you? Nice to meet you guys. Finally.
So, Syahrul, just as you've joined, I was wondering, did you hear the question, and do you have anything to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, my personal view on that, I mean, I've been talking about this. It is something that what we call as founders' ego. Being founders themselves, they deem that they know everything. It is something which is undeniable because the company or the startup is founded by them. But what they fail to realize is that there's no way that you can be a jack of all trades. You may know how to start your company from your own idea, create an MVP at the very least, but to get the other soft components in order for you penetrate the market, you would need advice from other people who are the actual subject matter expert of from different sectors. If you're talking about market access, typically from a Malaysian guy would know maybe up to the extent to Singapore or even Indonesia within our region. But if this founder were to think about expanding in the Europe, for example, dude, how are you going to do that? Maybe you know something, but there are people, there are mentors or investors out there who would be able to provide more value to fast track, to help you accelerate, rather than you have to reinvent the wheel by yourself. It's always good to partner up with a VC, for example, that would assist you in that particular space of getting larger market access than the Southeast Asia region only. I mean, that's my personal view. It's all about founders' ego. You have to step back and have some humility.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, on the other side of investors and funders ourselves, we are not saying that we are better than them. No, it's a win-win situation. You know something, I know something. I may not know what you do, but you may not do what are the advantages that I have based on my network. So it's all about being humility from both ends and having the consensus of being a strategic partner for the growth of the startups. Lose the founder's ego.
Okay. Really interesting. Look, we've got a couple of more questions coming in. So let me fire off another one. This is a popular one that's come in. What if I don't want my business to grow and the investor doesn't get that? What does that conversation look like? Perhaps we can ask Faraz if you could maybe pick this up for us.
Well, it does happen. We came across some pitches in which the founders were very content with a certain trajectory of growth, and it's always better to actually kind of understand and negotiate the growth trajectory and potential exit plans in advance. So the founder, the startup, and the investor both are on the same pages. Now, coming just piggybacking on the previous question, Sarah rightly said this, that the investor humility is critical in understanding and appreciating the whatever that startup or the founder really wants. And more our industry has been conventionally called vulture capitalists, not venture capitalists. And I think with the passage of time, there is this sense of coexistence and appreciation of intangibles from startups as well as the investors. Now, it's absolutely fine. I mean, there was one particular company that we were investing in, and both the founders came to us and we said, all right, you've got access to this distribution network and supply chain, and you can grow in this particular trajectory. And that was our vision. And they said, listen, we don't want to be Mark Zuckerberg, or we don't want to be, the $1 billion companies. Our aim is to be a $2 million company, and we're happy with it. And to which I asked, is like, why? I mean, if you have the option to grow, why do you want to? And it was a very humbling answer they gave. And they said, listen, we want to stay in the village we started off, because ultimately, this is where we see ourselves in, raising kids. Now, in the panel, there were two investors. They did not get that, but I personally resonated with it because these people were really, really mature. They really knew what they wanted. They really knew what their ambitions are. And as an investor, I went along with them. And when a point of exit came, they said, all right, this is what we wanted for. This is we wanted $2 million. If we get $2 million, we'll exit. Great. And then I went ahead with my ambition. So there is nothing wrong with not being over ambitious or you know that global domination dream that everyone has. All the startups usually have. If certain founders and startups don't have that, that's absolutely fine. And as investors, I think we should appreciate that as well.
I think there's a narrative there of purpose-driven responsibility in leadership.
Well said.
Okay, so I've got a question. Maybe Syahrul, you can answer this one. How do I work out the real value an investor brings to my business, and what signs should I be looking out for, and what if it's all built? I'm just conscious of time as well, so if I can ask you just to summarize that statement. Yes, Syahrul, are you there?
For me?
Yeah, for you.
Yeah.
You get the question?
Yes, I do. I think I read it earlier. It's about valuation.
Yeah.
This is typical. I mean, we've came across many startups that do their own valuation, and it is a norm that they over-evaluate themselves because they are the ones who set their own criteria. This is where Faraz mentioned earlier, the humility part of the investors, because investors come in. It's not a one-man show. We do have our rigid approval process, a rigid structured assessment process, our own investment committee that is being regulated by respective securities commission of any country. So we are holding investors' money, our LP's money. You are a fund manager. So this is a thing where most of typically that we have seen startups would do their own self-evaluate, but it will be hike up to a value that is almost impossible to achieve based on the reality of their current status. So to get the right valuation, in my perspective, venture capital or even private equity would be the right party to go to, because this is subject matter. They are the subject matter experts. They understand how do you evaluate your startup. Is it based on your revenue only, your profit, your MVP, your market access? You're talking about global market access, but you are selling something from Jakarta in Indonesia to Bandung, that's not considered as global. So those kind of substances and elements contribute to the whole valuation of the company. But it is normal that we find startups overvalue themselves, but reality check, they want to be funded, they want 2 million, they want 3 million, but they have to take one step back and admit what is their current valuation, which will be set by their respective investors. They have to honor that.
Okay.
Nice summary. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, final question, I suppose. Here's a question. Do investors prefer startups to have formed a company with Companies House and have a shareholders agreement in place? Or is this a nice to do? And I suppose this is back to an earlier question answered by Faraz about the legals. But perhaps Dr. Nazir, you can maybe kick us off with this one?
I think Faraz would be probably best suited to answer this.
Take it away.
I'll pass the buck.
Okay. All right.
Well, I think there is no set answer to that, to be honest. If the legal structure is already there, if they're already registered with the Companies House, the shareholder agreement and everything, it's great. But sometimes it's all right just to have an idea and not have that. It basically depends. I mean, there was a time that I always used to, or our investment committee used to have this particular idea that this is how it should be done. But we're living in a world where there is no perfect way. Ideally, yes, your legal structure should be in place, your NDA should be in place, your shareholder agreement, everything should be in place. But if it's not, then that really does not mean that, okay, this idea is worthless, or this business cannot go on a growth trajectory. So it's right up there. I wouldn't pick up a particular side and say, this is how it should be.
As investors, you would invest in a company that doesn't have a shareholder agreement or has been registered in the company. I mean, it's case by case.
It's case by case. I mean, the fact is, if there is an idea that has not been registered yet, which is so phenomenal, and I know that through my supply distribution communities of networks and resources and my investment, I can really take this idea forward. How long does it take to actually register a company and create a shareholders agreement? Right. It does not take much time.
Right. Right.
So it's honestly speaking, it's not because you and I, we all know that how long does it take? It's literally a 3-day process at the max. So I would look for the founders' maturity, the research they have actually done, the progress that they have created since the inception of the idea to their first pitch, and we can get that the legal formalities done on their behalf if the idea is wrong. As simple as anything.
Great. Thanks, Faraz. Firoz, I think that's all we have time for.
Well, that's sad because I was really starting to enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, I was about to add something onto that. But for us, I mentioned earlier, I think just a quick one is the attitude of the founders. To start things right from the very beginning, even at ideation stage. Because on our side, as being investors, we've seen startups that has been in operation for the past 3 years, 4 years, making revenue, making profits with some market access in the region. After 3 years, but they don't have a balance sheet. These are basics. And this is happening among our startups. There's no balance sheet after 3 years of operating. So they need to, really have the right attitude to start things the right way from the very beginning. Because this will help them to have a smoother transition from their ideation to seed, post-seed, all the way when they raise Series A, B, and eventually go to IPO, where there will be tremendous amount of documentation required.
Picking up, sorry, just the last point, picking up what Sir just said. Actually, if you're not structured from the early stage, it would be a bigger opportunity for an investor to capitalize on you. So in order for you to actually secure your a better transaction deal, it's more advisable to that your legal and your balance sheet or whatever progress you have made, it's more structured. Otherwise, the investors can actually have an unnecessary leverage on you. Now, I'm saying that and I'm shooting myself on the foot, but I think that's just the right thing to do.
That is when they call us as vulture capital, not venture capital.
Exactly.
So, dude, that's the perception.
Exactly.
Maybe we need to do a session or a greater conversation on the VCs then with the vulture in the background.
Absolutely.
With the vulture.
I think a vulture and a venture both.
Absolutely fantastic takeaway for our audience today as well. So listen, we've run out of time. I want to thank all of you guys, our panelists today, and everyone that tuned in live today for the webinar. We've got our next one in 2 weeks' time. So this webinar has been recorded, and you can listen to it again and forward it on. We ask you please to include the hashtag Halal Expo London.
And some valuable insights. So thank you everyone that's been part of this today. And fundamentally, we've brought people together from 3 different places. And that's exactly what this series is designed to do and become. It's a strong community of global and socially conscious entrepreneurs made of the seasoned investors from across the globe, where impact and humanitarian focused investors and the effervescent personalities such as yourselves make up many of tomorrow's startups. So again, thank you.
And so for investor, startup founder, CEO with something to share.
Or a policymaker, don't forget Firoz, that wants to get a better understanding of this space, then get in touch with us through LinkedIn, halalexpo.com, and let's get you in the conversation also.
Jazakallah.
So from us,
thank you so much.
Jazakallah, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the hospitality.